Despite of whatever superhero comics might have made you believe, radiation is not actually good for you and neither does it give you any superhero powers. And a 35-year-old man, Hisashi Ouchi, found it out in the very wrong way. I'm talking about Hisashi Ouchi, aka the most radioactive man to have ever lived. And in this video, we'll be going in depth of the 83 days of his suffering before his death. And apparently, there is a book called A Slow Death 83 Days of Radiation. That book dives deep into those 83 days of Ouchi and what actually happened there in details. So let's just take a peek in that book and see what does it have to say about Ouchi. 35-year-old Ouchi had a wife and a son in third grade. The three lived in their new home on the family property built in time for son's entry to elementary school. Ouchi was punctual, waking up every morning by 6 a.m. and leaving the house at 6:40 a.m. So far, we can see that he was a man of time, or at least so does the book have to claim. Let's skip to the part where the incident actually starts. At 10 a.m., Ouchi started his task in the conversion test building on the plant grounds, which was to process uranium fuel for experimental fast reactor Toyo, located at the Nuclear Fuel Cycle Development Institute. Since September 10, Ouchi and his colleague and their boss had been working on this project. Now it's in its final phase. It was Ouchi's first time working in the conversion test building. Following his boss' orders, Ouchi first filtered the uranium solution that had been melted in the stainless steel bucket using a filter called Nuco. His boss and colleague poured the filtered solution into a large container called a precipitation tank. The boss placed the funnel in a hole called the handball, which resembled a peephole and held the funnel in place. Ouchi's colleague poured the uranium solution in a stainless steel beaker. When Ouchi completed filtration, he relieved his boss and held funnel. They were on the seventh bucket when Ouchi's colleagues started pouring the last uranium solution. Ouchi heard a loud smack accompanied by a blue light known as the Cherenkov light. The light is emitted when criticality is reached. To understand criticality, we must actually try to understand what does actually happen with uranium-235 in this nuclear fission reaction. So a neutron from outside actually gets in contact with the nucleus of uranium-235, which then starts a reaction where uranium-235 releases multiple neutrons that actually gets in contact with other uranium-235, which actually starts a chain reaction that actually keeps the reaction going independently, which situation or the phase is called criticality. At that instant, neutron beams, the most powerful form of radioactive energy, pierce through their bodies. They had been exposed to radiation. At 10:35, the area's monitor siren rang alarmingly, alerting a radiation leak inside the plant. "Run for your lives," shouted the boss, who was in another room. Ochi hurriedly left the scene and took refuge in the changing room outside the radiation supervision area. Suddenly, he vomited and lost consciousness. So, what we notice is after exposure to radiation, Ochi instantly leaves the area, but still he was in contact with radiation, and that actually takes a toll on body. And we can see that as we are said that Ochi starts vomiting and actually passes out instantly. Hisashi was immediately taken to the University of Tokyo hospital for treatment, where the doctors had determined that he had received 17 sieverts of radiation, which is actually insanely high. Just for the context, the annual average dose of radiation for a human being is 2.4 millisieverts, which is actually 0.0024 sieverts, which is actually very low compared to the 17 sieverts Hisashi has received. But if you take a look at this chart, you can see that there are countries that actually exceed this limit like China and India, where India has almost 2.50 millisieverts, which is actually over the scale, but it is actually way lower than compared to Hisashi. If we do a quick calculation, we can find that Hisashi received more than 7,000 times of the annual radiation limit for human safety, which is actually very dangerous. So let's get back to the hospital. The doctors didn't actually find any symptoms that were externally visible. I'm talking about symptoms like burns or rashes on the skin. But he did actually complain about pain in his ear and his hands. And the doctors also did notice his face getting red and swollen and his bloodshot eyes. In this situation, one might think that he is going to get well, but it doesn't happen that way, and the problem is just about to start. But within a day, his situation just got worse as the blood reports had arrived and it was not pleasant. The blood reports showed that the count of white blood cells in his blood was close to zero. And we all know that white blood cells is the part of our blood that is actually a core essential part of our immunity. Getting that close to zero means he's now vulnerable to any kind of germs or bacteria. Things just started to go downhill for Ochi as he started to require oxygen for breathing and his abdomen started to swell. A specialist who actually took a look in the image of the bone marrow cells of Ochi found out black dots in his chromosomes. So for reference, this is a normal chromosome and this is Ochi's chromosomes at that time. Chromosomal analysis found that Ochi's chromosomes were actually destroyed or heavily damaged. Ochi's body would not be able to generate any other cells or new cells at that time due to lack of chromosomes. Observing Ochi's situation, the doctors decided on October 5th a stem cell was to be transplanted using his sister's cells. Initially, those stem cells were working, or so did it look like. But within second to sixth week, the transplanted stem cells had failed. Transplanted cells could not engraft due to DNA destructions due to the radiation. Severe damage caused progressive skin failure and fluid loss. He was at a situation that his skin was starting to fall off his body, and the doctors had to graft new skins or parts of skins to his body just like patches of stickers. The tissues inside his body and the gastrointestinal tissues in his body were starting to fall off and fail. At the end of October, multiple infections were found in his body, and in the early November, he was unable to breathe on his own, so respiratory support was deployed to help him breathe. And in the end of November, he actually faced cardiac arrest, which means his heart actually stopped beating. And the doctors had to resuscitate him using machines at the request of his family as they were not going to accept his death. And in the weeks 7 to 11, his body no longer produced bone marrow. His digestive system, lungs, kidney, and many other organs were destroyed. He required constant transfusions of red blood cells, platelets, plasma, and many other things. And in the mid to late November, his body was in a very bad situation. Several episodes of fluid transfusions were already done in his body. Respiratory support actually increased as his body was getting weaker and weaker, and respiration, I mean, breathing was getting even hard on his body. And chromosomal reports actually stated that there was no way of recovery from the situation he was in at that point, and the only outcome was downhill, which means death was inevitable in this point. And in the early December, his heart became more unstable as he had another cardiac arrest and was again resuscitated on the request of his family. Although his family had high hopes for him surviving this incident, after 83 days of treatment, he succumbed to another cardiac arrest and was not resuscitated this time and was officially dead in the 21st of December 1999, and the official cause of death being multiple organ failure due to radiation symptom. After hearing this story, you can see, as so can I, that this is a very horrible and sad story that had happened with Ochi in his real life, and we do hope that there is no other victim in this world that faces such situations. And in this situation, you might think that it is another case of luck going wrong. But you can't be more wrong. As while I was doing research for this video, I saw that there was another nuclear disaster happened in the same Tokaimura nuclear power plant where Hisashi was working. Before I go any further about this place, let's just try to understand what was this company actually doing. The JCO facility converted uranium hexafluoride into enriched uranium dioxide fuel. There were multiple issues with the power plant that Ochi was working in. One of them were lack of oversight. There was no criticality alarm for nuclear disasters, which led to the delay of news being spread to the people around, which actually made many other people exposed to the radiation later. And the second problem with it was unapproved procedure. As the company actually did multiple layoffs and they tried their best to do cost cutting, and the employees were not given perfect procedures for the chemical reactions. There is also a report saying that the company did not actually apply for procedure verification as they knew that these process will not be verified. And by March of year 2000, Japan's Atomic Nuclear Commission started investigating into similar situations and many other nuclear power plants. In April 2001, 6 employees, including chief of the production department at that time, pleaded guilty to the charge of negligence resulting in death. During the trial, the jury learned that a 1995 JCO Safety Committee had approved use of steel bucket in the procedures. Furthermore, a widely distributed unauthorized 1996 manual recommended use of bucket in making the solutions. A STA report indicated JCO had permitted these hazardous practices beginning in the 1993 to shortcut conversions process, even though that would mean to nuclear chemical handling problems. As a response to these incidents, special laws were put in place. Operational safety procedures and quarterly inspection requirements were done. These inspections focused on the proper conduct of workers and leadership. As you can see here, that the main reason behind the disaster of Tokaimura nuclear power plant was mostly negligence in supervision of the process and cost cutting of the company in this situation. Well, anyways, I'm done for this video right now, and thank you for watching so far. And don't forget to leave a like or dislike upon how much you have liked or disliked this video. And please do subscribe to my channel, which will actually help me make some bucks while making these videos. And thank you for watching.